Hi.
Hi.
Really nice to meet you and get to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. I guess I'll kind of just start. I'm Nadiya Nacorda. Primarily a photographer, although I've experienced with some video and film, and I'm sort of playing around with that a lot more now. But in the show, with All and In Between, I have like 4 photographs, still photographs up in the show.
My name is Vasson. I'm primarily a sculptor, and I do also have video and photos in some installations. But for this show, I have a sculpture, delectability, and it's playing audio.
Yeah, I think even obviously before like we were doing this conversation, your piece was one of my favorite pieces in the show. Um, for like a lot of different reasons. I feel like I mean obviously like standing out as one of like the main like one of the like I think only like sculptural pieces. Um but yeah, there's something so like um I don't know, it just like drew I think it just like drew me in so many different ways.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, also seeing your photo in the posters and the image, that's just such a beautiful image. It's the sun was brown and over. That
Yeah. Yeah.
that, that image is just so beautiful. I think there's something really amazing about the way your work is like capturing really intimate moments. But it's like a softness that I don't know. It just it felt nostalgic and also like very beautiful in a way that's kind of hard to quantify and put into words.
Yeah, thank you. Um, how did you like talking about our work that's in the show? How did you, um, or can you just like talk a little bit more about that piece in general, like how you came to like make that specific piece, and like for you, how it ended up in the show, or like felt like you know what I mean, like its connection to like Africana's themes for that exhibition.
So that piece is like a wild ride for me because the main component in it, the speaker, the subwoofer, is actually it's actually my childhood bass amp that I learned to play bass on. That stayed with me all these years, and the wood in it is salvaged from a tree that Richmond was cutting down in Carver Ward, and
Mm,
I saw the city cutting down, and I got some salvaged parts, and then the the legs are from a salvaged coffee table that reminded me of kinds of coffee tables I used to have in my own like childhood homes, and it came together because there was a lot of techniques I was playing around with that were familiar to me, even just like learning how to rewire a subwoofer or a speaker.
mm,
Something
mhm.
my brothers used to do a lot for their cars.
Yeah.
Um,
Are these older brothers or younger brothers?
older,
Okay. I was thinking
10
older. But
yeah. So it came together in a way while I was in grad school. So I was actually given an assignment, and I was playing with all these materials. I was using some skills I had, and I decided I looked at this bass amp, which I had with me for like 10 years at this point, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna take it apart and reassemble it in this way, and then I did performances with it. So there were
mm,
several performances where I had a mic machete that I would cut fruit with, and the mic would play back into the speaker. The machete is like not functional right now, and so I shot the piece that way. But there's a new machete on it, and the audio it plays is just really low, like 45 and 40 hertz sine waves, and they kind of just shake. And I really remember like when seeing people like play with subwoofers, it was seeing the motion of the cone itself that like drew me in. I was like, whoa, the entire
yeah.
cone, the way it shakes, the lowness that you can feel in your body. And
Mhm.
yeah, playing around with that, I really like having that audio playthrough so you can see the cone visibly shake and feel it when you get close to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was definitely one of the things that was, like you mentioned, nostalgia. Like that was definitely one of the things that drew me into that piece, but also like had me reflect on a bit of nostalgia as well. I don't know about you specifically, but for me, when I think about like that movement and the subwoofer, like I'm originally from Detroit and grew up like in and around like Detroit, and um, so like a lot of riding around in cars with giant subwoofers in the back. Something that I probably wouldn't be able to like do now, but back then that was like the thing. And like
Um,
growing up,
so well, also, just I'll say, I grew up in Jersey, like East Orange, West Orange, like Newark area, Essex County, and so yeah, and even like club music and all of these things were like really like important parts of like my childhood and how I understood like sonic like registers and sound. I also played bass in school for years, so
Mm-hmm.
it was really important to me. But I wanted to also talk about I wanted to ask you about your photos because
Yeah.
they feel like these vignettes, and I think about choosing materials and composition in the sculpture as like creating vignettes or moments, and I feel like your photographs are almost they're pulling into these these really beautiful places, and I want to know how are you like how are you working with your models and how are you taking these and what is it like to create these images?
Yeah. So I primarily photograph my family. Um, and it's something that I've been doing for quite some time. And it's actually how I came to become a photographer I started by photographing my two youngest siblings. Um, and they are in the other three images in the show, aside from the one you already mentioned, that's sort of like in the promotional materials for the exhibition. And the two of them were, Tanya and Kaya were like 2 and 4 when I started photographing them. And so it really started out with me wanting to document their childhood. And then over the years, it sort of developed into this thing where I would, while spending time with my family, would sort of look for moments that were like sort of like an opening in order to take a photograph, if that makes sense. So sometimes it would be the lighting, which, I think at least, the one of my grandmother and my sister sort of laying down on the floor. And then the second one, where it's like I'm very intentional about the directional lighting in it, where their heads are kind of cut off and you just see their, pajamas and the way that she's sort of gesturing and holding onto his arm. Those images the lighting is very intentional. I saw the light first, and you're talking about composition. That was something that was like I was drawn by the image that I, sort of like knew I could make with that lighting, if that makes sense. Like I saw the light, saw the frame, and I was like, okay, how can I put them into this frame? Because I always have images in my head that I want to make. And certain ideas, whether that's like a gesture, like wanting to capture a gesture. And so, yeah, I feel like it was, and still is, this like weird way of weaving my lived experience, just my life in general with the people around me, and then finding these openings for making photographs. And it gets difficult, I think, to make work that way, because it's so dependent upon, especially now with COVID, it's dependent upon being able to travel, that proximity to them, that access to them, just to be around them. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely something that I'm being challenged to like reconsider or to like rework in a lot of ways, which might be why I'm turning a little bit more towards video.
Yeah, but you know, I also did say like I also really appreciate your titles too, because the title of the piece you just described, like the Saturday morning cartoons, that
Mm-hmm.
title had a lot of like it was really when I read that I was like, oh, okay. I felt a context because my brothers are older than me. I remember like being in that kind of like that space and like waking up and this kind of leisure like in like closeness on a
Yeah.
Saturday morning between like you're not going to school, you're just in the house, and so it was really beautiful to like even allow like feel the poetics of the title play
Yeah.
back.
Thank you. Thank you. I am. I'm so bad with titles, and that like it's not until I have to show the work to somebody else and somebody asks for a title that I even go to title the piece. Um, but when I do, I always have fun being like, all right, let's title 10 images all at the same time. Um, and like, that just be it. And I also often like might change a title if I feel like I want it to just be called something different. I don't know if that's like quite allowed, but I'm like, yeah, whatever. I do it all the time.
I, I definitely changed some titles. Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah. For you, I'm like really curious. Um, in terms of like for you, like your relationship to you're talking about like home and your family, like your brothers, obviously, like that and that influence it had on you. Can you talk a little bit more about like, or in general, like how that relates to, or maybe doesn't relate to the why behind like you make work? Um,
Yeah. So for context, in my family, the immediate family I grew up with you know in New Jersey, I'm the only person who was raised entirely in the States.
mhm.
So everyone else in my family had come from the Caribbean, or had stayed there for some length of time. My brother's in St. Lucia. My father is from Jamaica. My mom's from St. Lucia as well. And so
Mhm.
for me, I think a lot of like learning life lessons were also trying to contextualize lessons I was getting and memories and stories I was getting from another place that I could
Mhm.
experience like in the moment as it was being taught to me. Uh,
Yeah.
but they were still relevant, and it's like learning the relevancy. And um, so for that piece, there are like small poetic moments throughout it too, because I think of my sculpture similar to the way I think about poetry, and I did slam poetry for some time and competed for a while. Um,
Mhm. That's
and
right.
yeah, I think even to like, okay, I will say the machete on the top. It's a very specific kind of machete. It has like a little hook on the back, and it's like a wide blade. It actually, the first time I saw a machete like that, I was in Jamaica, and I was going with my uncles to see my grandfather's grave for the first time.
Mm.
And so we were like we're leaving Trelawney, and we're going on this highway, and then we come to this like just this like greenery on the side of the road, and my uncle gets out and he takes a machete, one of those machetes. He starts like swinging, and then you take the hook on the back and rip the vines out the way, and then eventually we got to the grave, and it was just a slab of concrete, and
Mm.
trying to make that make sense, what just happened, like that experience and being in a place where everything was different.
Mhm.
And a lot of my lessons and things I was being taught and understood were making more sense. And
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
coming back to the States and being like, it's it's slightly it's slightly different. And I think working through those images and the beauty that I see across those spaces and the conversations I have with people throughout these, it's really like where the work comes alive for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, even like in the show, my thesis show for my grad program that I graduated this year, I had a video that was just a short poem about love, but it was translated into Jamaican patois and said
Mhm.
quite well. And then all three translations were put up at the same time. And
Mm.
I imagine there's like really there's a moment where there are some people in my family who could read all three of these and would
Right.
understand, and that's a rarity. And these are also languages that don't even have like a lot of dictionaries available to read them.
Right. I was gonna say like yeah, like that materiality of like, oh, let me go look that thing up, Yeah.
Mhm. So it's working through all of those things is like pretty, it's central to how I'm thinking about what I want to make and what images and what poetics are important to me.
Right.
Then as far as like what materials I'm using in the process, I try to vary what I'm doing, and I try to like allow myself to, if it comes to like installation or working on a video or a photo or a picture, allow them all to even speak to each other as installation. And that piece in the show, I even like that there's the sonic element still allows me to show that there's more that I can, more narrative or more space to hold like creativity, like even bringing in a sonic element to a sculpture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I feel like there were so many things you just mentioned that I can relate to. I'm the only person in my family too that has primarily grown up in the United States. My mom was born in the United States, but went back and forth to South Africa with her family for a number of years, and like spent years there and came back and things like that. But I'm the only one that was born here and then like fully grew up here. How did you, in talking about the like your like return home or to Jamaica, or really, or maybe what I'm asking is like for that return for you, or that going to Jamaica, this place where your family's from, did that feel like, or did that feel like a return for you? Was that this sort of home going? And that's the way my family always talks about it, and they always say their home. They always describe their home country as home.
Yeah.
Back home, this, like you're talking about, you mentioned those stories. And yeah, I can relate to that so much too, because that's, and my grandfather, who I also visited his grave for the first time when I went back to South Africa. I never met him though, but all those, we're talking about stories about people who you never got to meet, for things that you weren't around for. But then for you, like that bridging, right? Like you going to that place, was that like a homegoing for you? Was that, and then, because I'm taking from what you're saying, like so much of what you're drawing from in your work comes from those experiences of those sort of trips and wholeness of that,
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I also want to reflect it back after this, but for me, the trip to Jamaica, the last time I went to Jamaica was actually some time ago, and I was quite young. I have some really beautiful memories from that trip. I really like loved the experiences. But I think the last time I went to the Caribbean was I went to St. Lucia, and that was 2018, and that was like a surreal experience because I heard all these stories about this place that, like you said, everybody called home. Like in the house, no one said, like they didn't say like the name of the island. They were like, oh, back home, or someone is home. And when I got there, I imagined I was wanting to make like video work, and I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. And then this weird experience happened where I started to see things that I had been described to me in the stories, and I recognized them without anybody having to say that that's the thing from the story. Like I just saw it in its mode, and I was like, whoa! Everything just felt relevant again. And then I ended up jumping between my family in the countryside and my brother, who was working at a resort at the time. And I got to do tours and things, and I saw the sugar mill ruins, and I saw this like landscape of like rusted steel artifacts that like built the economy that built this place. And I heard also the tour guide, he said the country came in and stopped people from stealing the stones from the sugar mill ruins to build new homes in Dennery, the town.
Wow.
They wanted to preserve them because the national park system in the States has like a expansion into the Caribbean where they turn sugar mill ruins into like tourist sites, and they want to protect that. But then hearing like this tour guide say, well, people from the town used to come and take their the stones from the ruins and build nice homes in the town. I was like, wow, wouldn't it be better to see like the stones that like built infrastructure to protect people's ancestors,
Right.
dedicated to housing them rather than to being some artifact of like colonialist history to be and turned into new monuments. There's actually
Right.
that called like sugar mill ruins. But how was it like going to like? Does any of that resonate? Like the kind of feeling of seeing the stories kind of come to life?
Yeah, in so many ways. I think, yeah, it was for me going to South Africa was surreal. My father's from the Philippines. My father was born in the Philippines, grew up in the Philippines, and I went there when I was young as a child and haven't been back in a really long time. And that was a completely different experience than going to South Africa. Um, probably the same year. I think in 2018. I went late 2018. So like as a child versus going as an adult, obviously two completely different experience. I mean, two very different countries, but just that experience of going home. Yeah, because there was so much more that, um, going back as a child or going to the Philippines for the first time as a child, it was just like pure observation, right? Like I don't know. I'm just like, I'm along for the ride. I'm, 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old. Um, you know, being like in my later 20s, it was, I felt in so many ways like I was more of like an active participant in trying to, in making these connections or like bridging these, gaps in relationships with the only people that I'd heard my grandmother talk to on the phone, and she's saying, Mavi's on the phone, she says hi, those sort of things. There's people I knew of in my family, but being able to see them, be with them, spend time with them as an adult was, it was like beyond words. Very much felt like this like homegoing, and specifically also because of the way like I was treated. I think there are many experiences I hear from people about going to a country where their parents might have either migrated from or their families from, and said like, oh, I felt out of place. They, of course, I get treated differently because I'm not from here. Like, whatever. I didn't. I had to be very aware of obviously the fact that like, okay, that I'm American. There's a lot of different privileges that I have here, things like that. But the sense of like I'm home, like I've come home, like I even was like that was even like described to me or said to me like, oh, we're so happy that you've come home. You finally come home, and it felt like a piece of me that was missing had been filled. And that's what, to me, that's what it reminded me of, that when you said like these stories that you had been hearing, and then when you go home, you're like, you're filling the material in, from the stories that you had been told. I think, and a lot of things, in coming back to the United States, for my family, my immediate family is here, so many things made sense. I think one of the things that I think about a lot in relation to this, to my like, Blasian cultural identity is like the concept of time, which is something that I think about a lot. In that, like the way, and I like obviously also too, like this might relate to resonate something like in the way of like the Caribbean, like they call island time, but like, in South Africa, if you're 4 hours late to a wedding, you're on time. Like, if you show up on time to a wedding, people wonder, why are you here? Everybody knows that this thing does not actually start at the time we said it does. And my entire life, we were late for everything, like absolutely everything. I was like constantly like that kid growing up in the school, like, and my mom would tell me like, tell that white lady that time is an illusion. She literally said this to me. I didn't actually say that to the white lady in our school. It would not have gone over well. But but time, like the way my family has been here for 20 something years, they still treat time here as if they were still living in South Africa. And going to South Africa and being like, wow, this is like everybody in my family, like, oh, in South Africa, the way we're operating here, like this is just how it works here, right? I'm like, oh, okay, so like the gravity to which we really experience, like we deal with time in my family here, I'm like, it makes complete sense. Now it's like, it validated it in such a completely different way for me. And those types of things, I think inform my work and how I think about a lot of these themes. Yeah, I think it was probably the most important thing I've ever done as an adult was going home to after.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, I know you're talking about time, and have you read A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid?
No, I have not. I know Jamaica Kincaid, but I haven't read that.
She talks about a thing in time in Antigua where things move at a slower, at a pace that's like not necessarily slower, but it's both slower at times and then so intense. Like things that happen, emotions are so intense. And I always think about it as like, emotions and like self-care being prioritized over this kind of like illusion of time or order.
Yeah.
And with that, I really think I see like the beauty of like work and your work and like being able to capture those moments and give some of it through an image into a space in that show. And I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, too. I feel like we could just keep talking for like a long time. Like swapping stories.
Yeah, no, I definitely would stay in contact. My social also is a young fine artist on Instagram, and yours.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What's your Instagram handle?
Just my first and last name, Nadiya _Nacorda.
Oh, I'll add you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for. Thanks to Candela for putting the show together. I'm really glad I got to meet you through it.
Yes, thank you so much. I feel like this was such an amazing show to be a part of. So grateful for the opportunity and everybody that I got to meet. Yeah, this is amazing. All right. Thanks, Jaya.